everyone, thank you for joining me on the Arden Creative Studio YouTube channel. Now today I have got a tutorial using decoupage papers. So I'm going to be using the decoupage papers from the Arden Creative Hidden Creek collection. They're absolutely beautiful. We are going to be putting these onto multiple materials and also showing you some techniques. Now the one at the end is absolutely my favourite, so stay tuned for that. Now let's dive straight in case you've not seen decoupage papers before. What are they? So decoupage paper is a printed and very thin paper, so you'll notice it's got a slight translucency to it. Sometimes these are black and white, sometimes like these Arden ones you do have beautiful colours. So these ones have so much gorgeous detail, it's no wonder we want to find some additional ways to use them. So I'm going to be using primarily these ones, but as I say, there are many others on the market as well that you can be using. So these ones are quite small, cut down quite small already, so you can easily trim these. I would suggest cutting them because they're so thin with scissors rather than a trimmer. But cut them down to size so that you don't waste any. Now the first thing we're going to do is glue them onto items. This is what decoupage paper is usually used for, but not just paper and card. So what about something like wood or MDF? You can absolutely be decoupaging onto a material like this. So a quick overview for you in case you've not done it before. As I say, I'd like to trim it down to size first as best I can. So I tend to use the fact that it creases easily as a guide. So I'm just going to go round my shape, which is a heart-shaped piece of MDF. I can just about see it in there as well, or through the paper. And then I can just trim this piece off. I could even trim these corners off to kind of just go around the shape a little bit. I can just about see where those markings are where I just creased it. You could use something like a pen as well if you wanted to. So just to take this down so it's a bit smaller. There we go. I'll pop these pieces to the side because you can absolutely be reusing those. Now my favourite medium to adhere these with is the distress collage medium because it dries matte, but there's lots of other glues, even just PVA will work. And I tend to not put my glue usually directly onto the paper because it gets quite hard to move it around. If I can, I prefer to put it onto the material or the base that I'm going onto first, spread it around and then apply my paper afterwards. So with whatever glue I've chosen to use, I tend to go around the very edge of my shape and then a little in the middle as well, and make sure you put the lid back on straight away. And then I apply a little bit of water to a brush. So rather than spraying the water, I'm just going to dip my brush in there just to dampen that. That just helps to kind of water down the glue a little bit, not too much though. I'm not applying lots of water, I'm just dampening the bristles to make that glue easier to spread around, making sure it's coating everywhere and then working quite quickly because the MDF there will soak that glue in very quickly. I'm going to press that over the top, really pressing down, making sure there's no air bubbles, and if you want to you can go over and just add any excess glue and water that's on your brush over the top as well. That will all soak in. What we definitely want to be doing is ensuring that our edges are sealed here. So just with that brush I'm just pressing down those edges. You can do it with your fingers, and then you want to give that at least kind of 5-10 minutes to dry. If you've got longer, then that's absolutely ideal. You notice I'm drying this with a heat gun, and that's absolutely fine. You can do that with decoupage paper. You can heat it up, no issues at all. And I'm starting to get that opacity back that we did have. And now if I lift this up, that is completely sealed. Now the best way to go about getting this off is with either a nail file or a sanding block. So I tend to take quite a coarse, this is a nail file, and I'm going to brush downwards over the edge. If you brush up, you risk lifting that paper back up. So by brushing down, you're just going to pull away from the edge the paper. Now I've got some texture here where we've got some kind of raggedy bits in the shape. It's not a perfectly smooth edge. So I just need to make sure I get into all the angles of those. And there we have our decoupage paper glued onto our wood, nice and secure, all dry, completely smoothed down. So that's a very basic way of using the papers, and that's kind of what they were mostly designed for to start with. But you don't have to go on to just opaque solid surfaces like this. So what about going on to either glass or plastic or something clear, maybe even some acetate? Well, the same applies really for these as well. So I'm going to take this bauble here, and I'm just going to imagine that I want to put a small amount. We're not going to be covering the whole thing, although you can absolutely cover curved edges with this. So let me just show you in exactly the same way. We are going to apply our glue, whichever collage medium or glue that you've chosen to use, and we are going to apply it to the base first. Just wet our brush a little, smooth that over. I've actually got quite a lot on here. Now I've applied the glue slightly wider than I'm going to need it, and just press the center of your strip down first of all, and you can slowly start to shape the tissue too by pressing over the top. Now you'll notice you'll get some creases and crinkles in the decoupage paper, but that's exactly what it's designed to do. It will crease ever so slightly, but because it's so thin, you won't notice it in quite the same way as you would if you were using a thicker paper. And actually those wrinkles and crinkles really do add to the effect. So I'm just brushing over with my watered down glue over the top there. Like I say, this particular brand does dry matte, so you can see I've got lots of glue excess there. So I'm going to take my water again. I'm going to give my brush a wipe, and I'm going to again work quite quickly because this will dry reasonably fast. Squeeze the excess out of my bristles, just wet my brush again, and I'm just going to run some water along the edge here, effectively cleaning up the excess. So wiping that then onto my paper towel, brush that off, and there we go. I've cleaned up the excess off the actual bauble, and that's the same as I say. If you want to use something like acetate, you can do that. If you want to use glass, you can do that too. Now I will heat this up as I did with the last one, but I'll do it from a distance because this is plastic. Of course the plastic could also melt if I was really too close and left it on for too long. So I'm just going to use this from a distance just to really get some warm airflow around it, and it will dry very, very quickly. But of course you can absolutely be using air dry. Just let it air dry. Don't use a heat tool at all. You'll just need to take 10-15 minutes probably for it to dry. So this is then drying matte. Just make sure all your edges are sealed as you go. That looks good to me. And then we have a slightly transparent picture on top of our glass. Like I say, acetate glass, anything like that is absolutely perfect to do this technique with. So MDF or wood and plastic or glass we can go on to, but what about other materials? Now I want to show you a few photos here because this is a fantastic project that one of the Arden Creative DT did. Absolutely amazing. So what she's done is used the papers on a fabric, used a Mod Podge I believe to seal them, stick them down and seal them, and then stitched over the top.
See the scribbly leaf quilting on it. It's got a flat bottom and a zip. Really lovely little zippered pouch. It's got a nice kind of slightly crumpled look and feel, and I really love it, and I hope you do too.
It looks absolutely fabulous, and that's another way that you can be using the decoupage papers. Again, you do need some sort of glue and sealant, but the stitching just really adds to the effect, and because they are so thin, it does make these papers look like part of the fabric because they move around in the same way as the fabric does. Now, as well as just gluing these onto projects, you can use the papers dry as well. So I've got one of the sheets here and I'm going to die cut into it. Now you can just die cut directly into the paper, but if you use a lot of pressure and your paper gets stuck into your die, which often happens, you might struggle to remove it without tearing the paper as it's so thin. So what I suggest is take a piece of copy paper and put your paper inside. So fold this in half. Have your paper inside there, and I can just about see through whereabouts my paper is. So for example, I believe that will be on the paper there. I'm then going to use some low tack tape to just hold these dies roughly in place. And I'm going to run this through my die cutting machine, all 3 layers, so the 2 layers of the copy paper front and back and the decoupage paper in the middle. This way the papers are not going to sit inside your die in the same way. They're going to be much easier to release, and it protects them because the paper is so fine. So as you can see, all you need to do then is separate your 3 layers and you're left with a perfectly die cut very fine piece. So let's now make some beautiful decoupage paper flowers, because these for me are the prettiest types of flowers, simply because they are so fine and delicate. And layer these up in the same way as I would if I was making absolutely any floral. And one thing you'll notice with the decoupage papers is how quickly glue dries on them. It really does absorb the glue and dry very, very quickly, which is great if you want your project to be finished sooner rather than later. So just in the centre there, everything is glued in, and you can then adhere that to your project with a little gem in the middle as well for the most beautiful fine florals. But you can also ink the papers. So for example, if this was my flower, I need to add a centre to it already still, but if this was my flower and I wanted to add a leaf, but I've chosen to go with the decoupage paper because we've got the beautiful print on, we can absolutely be colouring this. So you can colour either side, the colour will hold, even if you use a water-based ink or spray, for example. So I'm just going to take a distress ink, and I'm just going to brush into the paper, like I say, in exactly the same way as you would if it was normal paper. It will absorb and it will dry. Now you could also spritz and spray this if you wanted to. There's lots of different ways to colour. You could use your alcohol pens on this. You could even use your alcohol inks to colour the papers. And what I love about this is that you then still have that print and that text through the centre there. So when we add this to our project, it looks as if it's a different coloured or paper, but it's not, and it's still got the same coordinating print on there as the rest of the flower. So I really love that, and that will be beautiful on a project, especially if we had a number of them. Now in addition to that, you can of course then ink the petals. So you could ink the centre of the flower in one colour, and you can ink the petal edge of the petals in another, or however you want to do it. That will dry very, very quickly and not transfer the ink. Now if you did want to use your paper but it be a little bit stronger, I'm going to show you a technique for that, and this is probably one of my favourite techniques to do. So I'm going to cover my paper with clear embossing ink. So I'm going to put this on a silicone mat or any sort of base mat. It might be your glass mat on your desk you want to use, but what you want to bear in mind is that you want to move it away from this mat when you come to apply your powder, because otherwise your powder is going to stick to your mat as well. So I'm just going over the entire surface. You might notice with your decoupage paper that it starts to go a little bit translucent with the wet ink on, just a touch, but that's fine because that means it's soaking in. And I don't tend to put my powder on straight away because I really want the ink to soak in here and make sure we've completely covered everywhere as well. So that is all pretty wet now, I think. I'm just going to check. Yeah, looks good. So I'm going to turn this over. In fact, I'm going to put a piece of paper underneath here so that I can tip my powder away. There we go. You can kind of see a little bit with the dark paper underneath where that started to go a bit translucent with the ink. Now this is a clear embossing powder and I'm sprinkling it over the entire project. Now don't panic because of course, as you know, clear embossing powder will go clear as it melts. So we'll see all of that beautiful image again. Now with a pair of tweezers, let's just lift up the corner and tap off the excess there. Lay that onto a mat. That doesn't matter if it gets warm, hence I've got my silicone mat here. I'm going to put my embossing powder back in the tub now before I knock it over or spill it, because I am quite clumsy. And we're going to heat set this now because of the lightweightness of the decoupage paper. Make sure you've got something just to hold that down. So I've got, again, my tweezers because they're very fine and they won't really show an indentation in the melted powder. And I'm just going to melt this in the same way as I would if I was heat embossing onto paper or cardstock. Now, as you can see, that has gone glossy, and as it's drying, it's trying to curl. So I'm just going to keep that smoothed out as best as I can while it cools down, which only takes a few seconds. Now, although that is still translucent, in fact, it's now more translucent, because let me bring in the matching paper and look at the two together. So there's the one without, and there's the one with the embossing powder on. Look at that, even more translucent, absolutely beautiful. Now you can still glue this onto any material you like, so if you wanted to then put it onto glass or plastic, you're going to see through it even more. You could make more glassine like flower petals there too. You could then die cut this much easier, but I just think it's an absolutely fabulous way of strengthening the paper. So if I now wanted to, for example, tear this, I'm going to have a lot more control because, as you can see, it's a little bit stiffer than it was before, so much easier to work with. But also, just for the sake of getting that translucency, it is a great technique to do. So I hope that started to give you some inspiration and ideas for using your decoupage papers, not just for traditional decoupage at all. And we'd love to see what you create with your Arden Creative decoupage papers as well. The ones I was using today was from the Hidden Creek collection. You can find a link in the description below to our stockists page on our website, which tells you exactly where you can find, local to you, all of the Arden products. So thank you everybody. If you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to subscribe to our channel and like this video as well. Take care. I'll see you again soon.